Let's have a look at the manufacturing bundle of AddonSoftware. The AddonSoftware manufacturing bundle includes the bill of materials and shop floor control modules. It's distributed with the accounting and distribution bundles. The inventory control module is required in order to create the component items and final items for the bill of materials and shop floor control. The bill of materials defines the items required for the final product as well as the finished item itself. The shop floor control module uses bills in the creation and processing of work orders. Along the way, there are numerous analytics available which report production exceptions, bottlenecks, labor efficiency, cost variances, and much more. Let's get started. For this demo, I've created 4 items, 3 components, and the 4th item being the finished product made from those components. So let's take a look at that. We'll select Inventory Control. We'll go down to Maintenance and Inventory Items. Let's look at the first item. It's a 155 sponge. So I enter that in, 155, and it populates the rest of the grids. The other items are a syringe, a metal tray, and the completed item is called an A444, and it's a kit that's made up of those 3 inventory items. Note that this component item has the checkboxes selected over here for allotted serialized, and that this is to be an inventoried item. Let's select the Display Additional Options drop-down, and we'll select the Warehouse Master. Warehouse 01 is Oregon in our demo data. Note that we have quantity on hand. Down here we've got quantity on hand. It also indicates what's on order, how many are committed, so 3 out of the 4, and we still have 1 of these available for our demo. Close that window, go back to that drop down, and we're going to select BOM where used. And we're going to run this report, and it's going to create a report showing that this item is a component of bill number A444, the finished item. Let's close that out. Now let's move over into bill of materials. So we're going to select bill of materials in the upper left panel, and then in the lower left panel we're going to select the bill of materials masters. Enter the bill number A444, our finished item. We're going to take a look at now is what are the material codes and what are the operation codes that are required and built into A444. Let's select Display Additional Options and select the Operations detail. This displays the operations for this bill, and those would be sterilization, packaging, and final inspection. Note that there are also values for queue and setup times, hours per piece, pieces per hour, moving time, costs, and over to the far right are 2 handy fields, date effective and obsolete date. These can be used to add or to remove an operation without having to build a new bill of materials. Let's close that window out. We're going to reselect that drop down, and we're going to select the materials detail. This form displays the component inventory items that make up this bill: the 155 sponge, the syringe, and the metal tray. Note that under the opcode header we show that the code 22 sterilization is associated with each item. As with the operations detail form, we have the date effective and obsolete dates available to the far right, and this is to handle any inventory item changes that might occur. Again, this saves us from having to rebuild a new bill of materials. So we have seen the material component items required to make an item A444 kit. We've seen the operations required to make that happen. Now we can create a work order that will use the bill, and we're going to link it to an existing sales order. So in order to do that, let's close out of here, and we're going to go over to Shop Floor Control, and then we're going to select Work Order Entry. Let's have the system assign the next work order. I tab out of the field and it says Assign Next Work Order. We're going to say yes, and that's 1113. We're going to enter 1 for a standard work order type, and for the bill number, we're going to put in our A444. Notice the status when we create a work order is at planned. When we select Save and we move through another couple of steps, that will change over to an open work order, and I'll show you what that means and how that's accomplished. We're going to select the Save button, and that brings up the work order material requirements form for your review. We again see the 3 inventory items involved in our bill, the operation steps over here under OpRef, the quantities required, and over here to the far right, the costs. We have the ability to include a finished bill item in a bill, and we could review those components when that is the case by selecting the Explode checkbox. There's a field over here, material reference number, which is handy for those companies who, for instance, have the requirement for a drawing number reference. They can reference that number within our work order. So let's close the work order window. Let's take a look at the additional info tab. Here we can link the work order to a sales order. So for this demo, let's put in customer 800, and that's Trident Industries. And for the sales order number, let's use that search feature. Since there could be multiple detail lines on a sales order, the system allows the selection of a detail line number using the drop-down tool. So if this sales order number had multiple items on there, I would be prompted and could select any number of those items. And for this case, I'm building an A444, so I'm going to select that, saying that this work order is going to satisfy that line on that sales order number. We're going to select the Save button. Let's return to that first tab by selecting the tab, and then we're going to select once again the Display Additional Options drop-down, and this time we're going to select Release Work Order. A review window now appears and allows you to review the inventory components, the numbers required, the on-hand, the committed, and the on-order. And in the top portion, we mark the boxes to release the work order, print a traveler, and print a pick list. If we had any inventory shortages here, if the required amount was more than the available amount, it would be lit up in red as a flag to us. Let's select the green Run Process button. And now you'll notice that the work order status has moved from planned to open. And that means that the inventory associated with this work order has now been committed. Let's close the work order, and we're going to go to Traveler Printing. And what we're going to do is we end up producing a report. Let's bump that up. Producing a report that details the inventory items and the operations required for the production of the bill item. Note that the customer and sales order number appears up in the top portion. Here's Trident Industries and that sales order number. We're going to close that out, and we're going to go to the pick list. We'll run that pick list. Let's bump that up a little bit so you all can see it. And what we've done is we've created a pick list for warehouse personnel that shows the required items to satisfy this work order. Pick list would normally be printed off and passed to a warehouse person to pull the items off of the shelf. Note that there are warehouse locations right here on the far left on the report, and space for the actual quantity picked to be written in. Additionally, there's a serial number line where the warehouse person would enter the item pulled. Pick list breaks up the list of materials according to the operation step at which they're required. So let's close that out. We're prompted, did the pick list print correctly? And this keeps the pick list in the queue or not. We're going to say that we're fine. It's going to move it out of the queue. There's our update prompt. Now we're going to select Materials, Issues, Entry in the Transaction Processing folder. We're going to enter that work order number, 1113. Brings up our information, and when we tab out of the field, it brings up a prompt, was this work order pulled complete? Well, our warehousemen were lickety-split and they've got all the component pieces for us, so we're going to say it was. And now the lower half of the window is populated with the items that are used in this bill. When I selected the Item ID row, it activates the Serial Entry button at the bottom right corner of the form. So let's select that button, and it's going to open up a Lotted Serialized Issues form. And at this step, the clerk can either enter the serial number provided on the pick list, or they can select the Serial Lookup button to open another form to select the serial number. Let's do that. Note that selecting an item in the grid displays additional information over here to the right: vendor, comments, cost, and location. So we save that, close that out. So we've repeated that process for the other two inventory items. Let's close that out, and we're going to go to the Material Issues Register. Do you want to run the register? We say yes. And here's a register confirming what we've done: the item description, serial numbers, the required dates, costs, etc. Work order total cost is $25. Close that out. And we've linked this back to the general ledger, so there's a GL ledger. Each of these are inventory items with a GL account associated with them, down here to the left. So we'll close that out. Do we want to run the register update? Sure. It's now complete. There's several other functions that I'll just talk to instead of demonstrating. Timesheet function allows the tracking of personnel hours for each operation, and this can include subcontractors as well. These costs are then, of course, added to the cost of the finished good. If there are cost adjustments to be entered, those can be done down here on the cost adjustment entry. That's a handy feature instead of going back at the component level or the bill level. So to finish up the entire process and close the work order out, we're going to select Work Order Close Data Entry. So we're going to put in our work order number, which I think was 1113. It says, we're prompted, do you want to close this work order? We're going to select yes, and that populates our close date. This demo machine is set up with a date of March 1, so not to be alarmed there. It also, at this point, will allow edits to the closed quantity field found right here. And it gives us a checkbox so that we can check it if this closing is going to complete the entire work order. So we'll check that. When we select the Save button, since the new item is also serialized, we'll be prompted for where it's going to be. We'll enter that number here, pretend 256 is our serial number, save it, and now we have the option to run the closed work order detail report. Looks very similar in layout to that traveler report. The final step is to run the closed work order summary register and update. So that was it. Completed the circle.